Rob was desperate for meatballs. We had some meatballs in IKEA.
There's the remnants.
And now we're sort of stranded in the middle of nowhere without a tube station unless we walk back over the North Circular to Neasden. So the Jubilee line. So we're on our way up to Stanmore.
Yes.
Should probably explain that we're on our way to Stanmore. What stations have you done in my absence? Have you collected any?
Yeah, I collected Waterloo, and I collected, Waterloo.
Just Waterloo?
Yes, just Waterloo, but it's a good one.
Yes, welcome to another map challenge adventure with me and today's trusty sidekick at Radio Robbie. This time we've parked the Piccadilly line for the time being and are instead off on the Jubilee to Stanmore. Our journey starts at St John's Wood. This station was built in 1939 and replaced two former Metropolitan Railway stations in these parts, Lords and Marlborough Road. The construction was all part of the New Works programme, which took place after the formation of London Transport in the late 30s. This was a series of restructuring, rerouting and rationalisation of all of LT's recently acquired networks. The Met would run non-stop from Baker Street, leaving a new Bakerloo branch to take over the local service to Stanmore. As the Met didn't surface until Finchley Road, it was easier to build two completely new deep level stops on the Bakerloo. This station was at one time to be called Acacia Road, and was even shown as such on 1939 maps. Though it may look like it, this station was not designed by Charles Holden, but instead an architect called Stanley Heaps. Still, you can see the standardisation of platform design being required by Frank Pick of the time, as this station is remarkably similar to deep level Holdens we've seen on the Piccadilly. Oh, and if you're wondering what's round here, then of course the local landmark is Abbey Road Studios.
No service between Romford and Upminster due to faulty train.
A short walk down the mansioned lined streets of St John's Wood and we're now at Swiss Cottage, another Metropolitan Railway replacement station. Other than a few subway entrances, a single turret marks the station's only surface level presence. It's unclear whether or not this was an original feature or a later addition. The station is of course named after the Swiss-style tavern, built here as a coaching stop in 1804.
What happens if you lose the map midway round?
Well, I've got a blog, so everybody knows. Where are you going?
Not getting off here.
No, we're missing, so I never...
So complicated.
This station is
So we're missing
Finchley Road.
Finchley
Change
Road,
here for the
because
Metropolitan line.
we'll do it later on the
Please mind the
Metropolitan.
gap
We'll do it on
between the
Met.
train and the
Another day.
platform.
Yes.
Yes, we've missed out Finchley Road, but we'll be back to collect it on a tour of the Met another time. You next find us outside West Hampstead, where we're taking a look at the 1897 ticket hall. So this time I brought my trusty Middleton press book. I actually bought this the other day. But we've been having a look at the 1897 building, of which that is. And at some point they've changed the ticket hall and the shops round. So originally the ticket hall was over on the right hand side and a shop on the left, but they've swapped that over and now the ticket hall's on the left hand side and there's a florist on the right. This anomaly occurred when the island platform below was shifted to the left to accommodate the construction of the Great Central Railway, or what we now know as the Chiltern Main Line, which of course parallels the Metropolitan line up to Amersham and beyond. West Hampstead is also interesting as it's one of three completely separate stations on the same 550-foot stretch of West End Lane. So we've just come from West Hampstead Tube Station, which you can see, Rob,
Which is there,
just in the background.
way off in the distance.
On this side of the street, do excuse the noise, you've got West Hampstead Overground Station, completely separate. Then behind me this way, let me see if I can find it, about there, you've got West Hampstead Thameslink, which is a completely separate station again. Not only is this the closest instance of three stations in such proximity, but probably the only occurrence in the UK as well. On now to Kilburn, which opened with the line as far as Willesden Green in 1879. Now it's not being helped by the weather, which was terrible by the way, but Kilburn's exterior, along with many stations on this stretch of line, is starting to look noticeably tired and neglected. Do check out the impressive Edwardian era bridge, which was added when the Metropolitan Railway quadrupled its tracks to Willesden.
Get them to come back and we'll do it again.
Kilburn is an ideal place to do some train spotting, but just as long as you get your timings right. We race alongside a Class 68-led intercity service to Birmingham as we move up to Willesden Green. The Chiltern Main Line, originally the Great Central, was also constructed at the tail end of the 19th century, when an agreement with the Metropolitan Railway allowed them to share the route into London. The joint companies even had an unusual agreement over maintenance, with one company taking sole responsibility for repairs in alternating 5-year periods.
For a brief moment they're catching up with it.
At Willesden Green, the two outer fast platforms haven't seen regular timetabled use since 1940. However, TfL continues to maintain them in case of emergency working, and they can be brought into use to cover for the Jubilee line during periods of engineering work, allowing the station to stay open. Outside the station there's plenty to see, including the station clock, which closely mimicked the platform nameboards of the period, and this rather striking mosaic tribute to local cat artist Louis Wain. Do head over to the CAS blog to hear more about him, links in the description below. Next on foot is Dollis Hill, which is possibly one of the roughest stations we've seen on this challenge yet. Even without the atmospheric weather, the neighbouring house and its contents are still pretty creepy.
This station is Dollis Hill.
We don't stick around to find out if the house had an owner, or why there was a "Beware of the Cat" sticker in the window. We'll now be bypassing a couple of stops and be heading straight up to Kingsbury, which gave us a little too much time to consider the Jubilee line's raison d'etre.
The original design of this line, remember back to the 70s, and it was 1979 when the Jubilee line took over what was the Bakerloo line here. The original plan was it was going to go into Charing Cross. It was going to go into Charing Cross, and then it was going to go sort of directly east and then out to Lewisham, and it was going to be called the Fleet line because it was going to follow the Fleet River. That all disappeared, and then they bolted on this kind of thing out to Stratford, which is kind of a neither here nor there solution to a problem that still exists, because Lewisham is still not served by tube trains. I'm really indifferent to the Jubilee line. I don't dislike it, but I've never warmed to it. It was sort of my home line for a while when I lived on the Isle of Dogs up at Canary Wharf, but I kind of always abandoned it for the DLR. Well, you would, wouldn't you?
So generally thoughts on the Jubilee line are that this is all good stuff historically speaking, but none of it seems to have been kept in any nice way
outside of
the
station.
But then you've got the newer bit on the Canary Wharf and all that sort of thing, and that is really nice to look at.
Which, if you go back to my previous video, that's kind of the problem with Hounslow East. At least the Jubilee line extension stations they're big and they're monolithic. Whereas go back and have a look at my video on Hounslow East, it's just this weird hat thing. Anyway, let's go to Queensbury. But before we do that, a quick look at Kingsbury, which was built with the branch line to Stanmore in 1932. Despite this falling within the popular Art Deco movement, the Metropolitan Railway designed the stations in a more 1920s arts and crafts style. This was in keeping with the identity of many of their stations in Metroland. Sadly, these days, the outside of Kingsbury is in a pretty bad state of repair. So not only is this
the tube map challenge where we've got to get out at every stop. It's now becoming the can you find an abandoned chair on each trip, because go back to the Heathrow episode, there's just chairs in the street and stuff. London, what's going on? Why are you just dumping chairs in the street?
And full ice hockey, air hockey tables.
Go on Rob's Twitter. He's tweeted somebody's just left an ice hockey table out in the middle of the street next to a bin. It's a brave effort, Kingsbury. It's a brave effort. So we're at Queensbury now. Rob's down there taking a picture. Famous thing about this station, the roundel in the middle of the roundabout. Station's over there, that big grand building. This is a suburban planning on a grand scale. So this would have been all built together. The station, the facade, the shops, and then this whole area behind us. All the suburbs, and then this sort of grand avenue running down there. At the time, an attractive place to move out of London and live. Lots of space, lots of big buildings. Today, very cold, freezing, foggy, a little bit murky, a little bit grimy, but I still like it. I like Queensbury. It's a step up from Kingsbury, I think.
There's time for one more intermediate stop at Sleepy Cannons Park before we walk up to the terminus. We're not quite sure whether the answer indeed lies at the end of the line like this poster suggests, and besides, we're not even sure what the question was. Anyway, this was the second station to be built in Stanmore after the Harrow and Wealdstone to Stanmore Village branch was constructed by the competing London and North Western Railway in 1890. Despite its competitor's station being more ideally located for the town centre, the LNWR did not offer through services to London, whilst the Metropolitan Railway did. Stanmore Village closed in 1952. London literally ends at Stanmore, merely a street to the north, and the suburban sprawl gives way to the local country park. If you could carry on in a straight line on the trajectory of the Jubilee line at Stanmore, you literally wouldn't bump into much until you reached the M25. We're now heading back into town to collect Neasden, where we hope to find some lunch. Neasden and its sprawling depot and works is a prime example of the negative impact infrastructure can have on two communities. Railway lines and large roads often provide physical barriers between neighbouring suburbs. It's important to remember that though transport attempts to mobilise a city, it can also break it in half. We found this out the hard way as Rob suddenly had a craving for some Swedish food.
I just want to show you what Rob's dragging me to. Look at this is wonderful, isn't it? Oh, lovely. Basically, he wants meatballs, so we've got to cross the North Circular to get meatballs. Wow, look at the view. Neasden.
What a load of cars.
Well, actually, it's Brent. We've walked across the North Circular because Rob was desperate for some meatballs. So, dare we ask, favourite station of the day?
Yeah, I didn't like any of them. Probably Stanmore, because that was where it ended.
Oh, Neasden really. Worst station of the day?
Oh, it has to be Kingsbury.
Now, is that because of the station or the area?
Both.
You weren't a fan of the area, were you?
No. Definitely one of the most unimpressive parts of London.
But it's got to be done.
It has got to be done. When you treat all areas equally, you're all included.
And somehow I've been made to walk over a bridge of the North Circular. I feel like I've smoked 50 a day because I've been breathing in the air of the North Circular. But we do have meatballs and chips at IKEA. To be honest, I thought I had this idea in my mind as part of the network. The Jubilee line was quite interesting. It was part of Metroland up to Stanmore. Sort of the suburban dream. This was the bit that wasn't really treated very well in the sort of 70s and the 80s, and now it's a bit run down. A lot of the stations are quite run down as well. Look at Kingsbury, I mean, it's wonderful old, should be wonderful old fabulous station, but it's just not been treated very well. I think the best part of the day was probably at the beginning, St John's Wood to Swiss Cottage.
The first road we walked down.
I don't know why they even needed tube stations, darling.
No.
It was lovely. Stanmore was quite nice. We got to Cannons Park, and Cannons Park and Stanmore were okay. But we've come back to Neasden. It's lovely, isn't it? So the Jubilee line. I've always, as I said, I've always been fairly indifferent to it. It will redeem itself at the Stratford end. I think it's going to redeem itself at the Stratford end. But I always thought this end it was sort of old school suburban London. But it's obviously not been treated very well. So glad to have ticked it off early.
And you'll be pleased to know we managed to find our way out of the Neasden-Brent-Wembley complex without the need for precarious footbridges and dark underpasses. We took a bus to Wembley Central, where we were rescued by the Jubilee's older brother, the Bakerloo. Don't forget you can catch up with the whole challenge by heading over to www.callingallstations.co.uk and clicking on the 270, where you can read stories, anecdotes, histories and notes for each station as I visit them, along with more images.
So you've been with Calling All Stations and
Radio Robbie.
Celery Man, not eating celery. We'll see you at the next stop. Bob Lap going away.
Yeah. It's all going on.
He's more resistant.
Yeah, that doesn't look too comfortable.
Who needs a gym membership?